Hey everyone, welcome to this special episode of the Manufacturing Hub. You may have missed us last week since we were at Automate. We're bringing the show back. The schedule should resume as per usual on Wednesday afternoons at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific Time. That being said, we wanted to create an episode where we wanted to discuss some of our opinions on Automate, discuss some of our previous experiences, talk about some of the exhibits and booths that we've been to, talk about maybe the ambiance and the atmosphere you can expect as a visitor, but also how to create a better environment or maybe how to put forth the best efforts from an OEM standpoint. But without any further delay, Dave, I think we want to dive into this episode number 163 of the Manufacturing Hub. The one thing I will mention before I pass the mic over to you is going to be that we do have a lot of clips. We have videos as well as short clips on our YouTube channel. So if you guys can do us a little favor, subscribe to the channel and let us know what you think about the clips. That would be extremely appreciated. But without any further delay, Dave, do you want to kick us off with the first topic we want to cover today?
Absolutely. I think the first topic is we should congratulate Vlad for asking people to subscribe. This is like probably the third time in 163 episodes. So, everyone, congratulations to Vlad. Vlad, thank you for reminding folks where they can go find us. Everyone, the chat appears to be working. So, if you guys have questions, thoughts, or comments, please feel free to go ahead and drop them below, and we will do our very best to go get to them as we do that. I wanted to, before we get very much into the thick of specific trade shows, specific highlights, I wanted to go have the conversation that Vlad and I have had, I don't know, probably a dozen or more times with a variety of people off stream at these shows, specifically talking about artificial intelligence. And when I talk about artificial intelligence in here, I talk mostly about like generative AI and what we have seen. And I guess I am more on the side of I'm excited. Well, I think that there are some easy applications that we can go ahead and utilize today and in the next 6 months. It's not going to find full steam for a period of time, but we have to go through these kind of nascent learning processes in order to be successful into the future. Vlad, I'm going to let you go ahead and kind of state your first thought as it comes to that. But before I go ahead and jump in and continue.
I'd say, at least, on my side, what I've tried myself has not been stellar. I think that the most interesting application that I've actually experienced and seen demoed live thus far was the one from Clint Bodogen in one of our
Mhm.
episodes, where he's using it to create an environment where you could simulate cyber attacks, right? And you could play
Yep.
either side if you're defending or if you're trying to get into the facility. And to be honest with you, again, like I've tried a couple of things in native chatbots, right? Whether that is ChatGPT or Gemini, and I've tried to create ladder logic, structured text, and I think it's too early. Well, I guess the way I would explain it is I think the most utilized, at least language on the control system side for the types of environments I was in has always been ladder logic, right? And again, that's a whole other debate, and I think any graphical type of structure or language, chatbots currently struggle with. And I know there's been a
Mhm.
video released very recently that shows that that may no longer be the case in the near future. But at least a lot of the co-pilots or the tools have been built for structured text, right? And I just think that there's a slight disconnect between maybe what their intended use is and what truly is the most useful, let's call it, programming language in the field. And I would say, again, I'm a believer that there's going to be an application where you can document a little bit better, maybe you can parse code a little bit better. I've not seen it, to be honest with you, in a state where I've played with it, that it was exceptionally well done. I think
Mhm.
I've seen, and both you and I looked at some examples where it was used to document, like 2, 3 rungs.
Yep.
But again, in my mind, it would make a lot more sense if it could, take an entire subroutine or even the whole program versus a couple of rungs. And like I said, I know it's still like in being proved stage, but I have not seen a demo besides, like I said, that cybersecurity one that has been tangibly impressive, right? And I can tell you, I've I've mentioned that demo to multiple people
Mhm.
because I didn't think someone could build something that extensive. And I don't remember the number of the episode, but if you type in cybersecurity by Clint on Manufacturing Hub on YouTube or LinkedIn, you should be able to find that event.
Yeah, that would have been last November. That would have been last November. I can't both comment. So, Vlad, can I have like 30 more seconds of you chatting while I go look up Clint's episode?
Yeah, sure. So I guess like I'll give the basic premise, right? So Clint has been working on tools that allow people to essentially go head to head again on the defense or on the attacker side when it comes to cybersecurity, in which you'd be selecting different scenarios, right? So imagine just I guess at the very basic level, a Q&A, right? So you're given a scenario and you're told what is going to be your next option or what is going to be your next action, and you select from four different items that are given to you, right? So for example, I'm going to set a password, I'm going to add a firewall, I'm going to talk to my IT manager, etc. And so at the early stages of his tool, he was developing this very fancy decision tree on both sides, right? So if you install a
Mhm.
firewall, well, then maybe the attacker can then select, I'm going to try and brute force the password, or we're going to try and deploy Trojan via, the wireless network. So anyways,
Mhm.
long story short, now with chatbots, it becomes a lot more interesting because you don't need those decision trees, right? The
Mhm.
chatbot can parse all of that information, and it could simply say what I'm going to do in a sentence, and
Mhm.
it's going to interpret that information and spit out the next scenario for the cybersecurity attack or defense, I guess, depending on which side you're on.
Absolutely. So I want to point out to all of our listeners on the podcast, Clint. Clint has been on a couple of times. Most recently, episode 140 last November was when we talked to him about this, and I forget what he calls kind of this new form of chatbot, red versus blue, of what he's got going on. I've actually seen it a couple more times since that point, Flat. I think it's interesting, and I think that is a really good example of where we're going to use it. I think that as you and I talk about examples and talk about use cases, for me, I think that if we're going to go have Gen AI write code, it's going to be, maybe we're going to go capture 80% of kind of the best code. I think we're absolutely going to struggle to go have it right, especially rungs of ladder logic. I've seen people talk about having successfully completed that.
Mhm.
For me, that is not where I see the best use cases going. So
Let's
for any
talk
of
about
our
those, right? Like, what do you have like as examples of those use cases?
the better use cases,
Yes.
absolutely. That is in fact where I was going to go, Vlad. So we have seen I guess I would say we have seen a couple of examples. If you guys are long-term listeners, last November, Vlad and I were at SPS Nuremberg. We were there at the launch of Siemens Industrial Copilot, which is a Siemens Microsoft kind of collaboration. And so we saw what I now shot 6 months later will call kind of very early stages of what that has become. That is what Siemens would now call their engineering copilot, where in theory it's generating code and documentation. They also have an operations copilot that I saw a little bit of at the Siemens booth at Hannover, and we'll get into that. But Vlad and I also got to have a fairly long conversation with Kristen Quasi of Siemens at Automate, and we will also get into Automate in just a moment. But for me, on the operations side, I find that really interesting. Let me go ahead and give an interesting example because I saw, especially at Hanover, lots of partnerships. So I was at Hanover with Harding Americas or Harding Technology Group. They are a German-based organization. I went over with their Americas delegation and had a bunch of interesting conversations about kind of their Gen AI solution. Now, Harding, for people who don't know them, they make connectors, right? Like you guys will know Harding for connectors. Vlad knows them for connectors. We probably can't talk about a bunch of the reasons that Vlad has used them, but if you guys know Harding, you almost certainly know them for connectors. And one of the things they do is they make a bunch of custom connectors. And so historically, my understanding is if Vlad's like, hey, I want to go have this connector. It's got to have, 46 different connections for a variety of different things. Maybe we're doing power and air. Maybe we're doing Ethernet or something else along there. It would literally be an engineer sits down and draws this out by hand, and it could be a days or weeks long process depending upon where you find them in the queue. They had this really interesting Gen AI. It's still early. I feel like I'm contractually obligated to say it's still early. We say it in the video that you guys will see coming out shortly. But they are kind of in the beta of being able to say, hey, I want a connector with all of these things. And the one that it created for us based upon kind of an early prompt, I think had like 45 or 46 connections of a variety of different sizes. And it went and it created that in 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes of real time. And it's not perfect, right? Like it still needs to be checked by an engineer, but it does the vast majority of the work up front. And it, in theory, allows any end user engineer to say, let me go check out this application to see what a connector is going to look like, right? Like maybe we get into cost, maybe we get into lead time, maybe we get into a bunch of those other things, but you have a connector in sub 5 minutes based upon that, right? So I think that is super interesting. And then while I was at Hannover, NVIDIA and Siemens were talking about a collaboration of the NVIDIA Omniverse. And it's basically like an API into the core of Omniverse to basically allow you to go ahead and render, which is really interesting. And so that very much kind of supercharged what I was seeing people use Industrial Copilot for, right? So instead, and Vlad's going to roll his eyes at this application because he rolls his eyes every time I talk about it, but I think it's super interesting. So on the Operations Copilot, you can go feed 50,000 pages of documentation into the generative AI, right? And it allows someone like a new operator or new maintenance person to say, hey, what are the things that I need to check today before the start of my shift? Or what are the things that I need to do in regards to preventative maintenance? And it allows it to basically go regurgitate that through the power of Gen AI and through the power of being able to kind of understand what that is. Now, for me personally, I've done work with organizations, and that has been dozens or hundreds of my hours of being able to go say, hey, based upon where you are, these are the things that you need to do, or these are the top questions that people will ask. So let's go ahead and pre-queue those top answers, right? So for me, that in and of itself is a bunch of time savings and is super interesting because it allows you to scale at a much faster pace than one-to-one. But the really cool part is if you've got CAD drawings or other things, it will actually go take those and ingest those drawings. And it's not 100% all artificial intelligence or large language models at this point. But you can go ahead and do things like pick out the oil reservoir, and you can go pick out other key components. So you could say, like, not Vlad. Let's say we've got a new engineer or a new maintenance guy. His name is Steve. It's Steve's third day on the job, and his trainer is called out sick. And they're like, Steve, go through the daily tasks. And so Steve could, in theory, go say, hey, what are the daily tasks? What do they look like? They could give him his list of 5 to 10 or whatever it is. And if he doesn't know the machines well, he could say, hey, I know I need to go check the oil, but I don't know where the reservoir is, right? Like, I don't know where it is that I need to go check. And I saw in the demo, and Vlad, take this with a grain of salt, like literally going into the CAD model that it rendered into like a three-dimensional model and highlighting this reservoir as, bright green. So it goes and shows people where that is. Now, there's always the question and the argument that Vlad and I get into is, how useful is that? For me, I think that if you have somehow managed to have a facility that everyone has been there 5+ years, you probably don't need it, right? Like everyone can probably go answer the vast majority of those questions. Everyone can probably go through the documentation to solve 80 to 95% of the problems that you're going to have. But if you're like most of the groups that at least I work with, and certainly the groups that I talk about, you get to the point of saying, hey, I rotate through these guys every 2 to 12 months for, 80%, right? I've got my core 20% of the group that does the vast majority of the work, but I literally cannot keep people on staff. I literally cannot staff third shift if it gets to the point of needing to staff third shift. And so it becomes, how can I help them so that they don't call me in the middle of the night? And I have my do not disturb on, so you guys would be calling Vlad over here in the middle of the night. And for me, I find there's lots of value in that. And for me, those are the type of use cases and applications that excite me, right? They're not raw engineering problems. They're operations, they're people problems. They're how can I reduce my engineering hours on the front end to hopefully help those engineers do the fun things of, we don't need to go quote this part that has 46 connectors and you guys need to take 3 days specking out and we hope it comes back with a yes, right? It'll be this is what they saw. This is what they'd ideally like to buy. Let's confirm we can actually go make this given the constraints of physics and reality. And if it's all good, we're just going to go ahead and roll it into production.
I would say, look, a couple of points. For me, the skepticism lies less so on the feasibility, more so on the accuracy, right? Because at the end of the day, I guess let's take a fundamental question on the operations, let's say troubleshooting side, right? If I have a drive that fails, right? Like I have a few PowerFlex like VFDs sitting here. What's likely to happen is that VFD is going to show some kind of an error, and then they're going to call, obviously, first the operator is going to see some kind of an error on the screen, which, again, depending on how the HMI is set up, it's going to be very descriptive or not descriptive at all. Then they're going to call, let's call it the shift electrician, right? Maybe an engineer, but usually first it's going to be the electrician. So imagine that the electrician shows up, it's going to be error 157. None of us remember what that is, so he's going to look in the manual. Usually he's going to have a general idea of where the errors are, and then he should have at least some process of determining, out of the steps outlined under that error, what could be some of the troubleshooting steps, right? Versus, I'm assuming the LLMs or the AI, and again, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, is going to obviously try and go beyond just the manual, and probably you can limit that, but it's going to try and find other information to also supplement what's in the manual, right? So my assumption is that it's going to give you things to try that may not always be accurate, right? And so I don't know if it's going to prompt, well, let's say the drive has this error, has it had issues before, has it, for example, does it have, I don't know, moisture damage on it, does it have, a power supply that failed upstream? So it's going to, again, and I don't know what the accuracy is going to look like, but I think it's going to give a very, very certain answer of what needs to be done to someone who's not necessarily as experienced as they should be. And so that's going to drive potential problems at the resolution stage, right? And so I agree, if your drawings are perfect and if the documentation is really good and if the problem that arises is fairly straightforward, but a lot of times, at least in, let's call it, engineering type of problems or that get escalated to that level, even I need to take a lot of, I want to say, like, steps to figure out what the problem is, and it's not as cut and dry as, hey, go to this page, to this like bullet point and do like ABCD that outlines there. But I agree, maybe it can give them some idea, but hopefully it doesn't give them this, how to say it, not necessarily the idea that they're going to always get the right answer, right? And I think you said it should be checked by someone competent, but I'm not sure that's going to instill that practice as it spits out very confident answers.
So I would agree with that. I guess we should put up kind of the rails of, my assumption or presumption is that the model is only going to have the information we feed it. And so if the documentation exists and if the documentation is perfect, it shouldn't, and you ask the right question, it will give you the right answer. Now, I don't know, Vlad, have you ever worked in a facility that had like all perfect documentation and people like update drawings? Okay, because I was going to say
that's the problem, right?
Yes, no, I agree. Like, I also have never done that. So in theory, Gen AI can only do the things that we ask it to do and the information that we provide, right? I would imagine for security, and the conversation I have with most groups actually looking at an implementation of artificial intelligence or LLMs, is basically we are probably going to gate this, and it's only going to be the information that we create, and it's probably going to be an industrial co-pilot, and it's probably going to be unique to our organization because, right, wrong, or indifferent, groups feel that there's lots of IP, and that is why they don't want people going and like dumping a bunch of their information out into ChatGPT or kind of one of
Right.
those.
Yep.
And I think it's important to again kind of make the distinction of, we're not suggesting you go dump this into in open to the internet, especially a non-paid for, non-company owned um, artificial intelligence source. That is certainly not what we suggest. It's certainly not what we would suggest to. It's not what we would suggest to anyone, especially with important information. So there's only so much that can be done based upon kind of initial docs. On my side, I don't think it's ever going to take away kind of that higher level problem solving or troubleshooting or or like engineering. Like, it's not going to take away that work. I don't think I don't know anyone who has said it's going to take away that work. What I see that the value in is, can we remove the 80% that is static and allow the more skilled engineers, maintenance technicians, operations folks to go do the more skilled work, as opposed to having to go troubleshoot and retrain brand new employees over and over and over again.
Look, we'll see what happens. We'll
Yes.
see what happens. I think there's a reason why, again, a lot of the, let's call it, consumer electronics, including some of the brands that you love, Dave, are going to limit your ability to modify them because they know there's a lot of user error, right? So I think
Yeah.
that giving the power to the user with the chat GPT that's going to very confidently say, like, do these steps and it's going to solve your problems, and leading them
Mm-hmm.
down this rabbit hole of, before the, let's call it, competent person shows up to actually troubleshoot, they've made a bunch of changes, is going to be interesting. So like I said, I remain positive that I think it's going to change some of the things for better, but I
Mm-hmm.
think it also opens up a lot of questions that I've not necessarily seen answers to, right? And I think it's a bit more complicated than we would like to admit. I guess before it gets into like the right hands.
Oh, absolutely. I think that we will have catastrophic failure because systems led people astray and because we weren't using our brains. It's like all of those memes. I don't know if you guys watch The Office or if Vlad has seen the American version of The Office, in which at one point the GPS told Michael Scott to go turn left, and he just turns left into the lake, right? If I was a meme person, I'd have it up and rolling, Vlad, but I don't. So I think it's one of those. It can lead us to some point, and to that point is valuable, but we always will still need to use our brains,
Yeah,
especially in the early nascent stages of this. I'm going to
I think.
pause kind of that conversation. We've got Eduardo from Honduras. Hola, Eduardo. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I don't know if you're the first person from Honduras that we have had watching. I feel like you're the first. You're the first comment from Honduras that I remember. We've got Sammy in the comments talking about how he's heard about a SCADA called Steam working on a new feature, building SCADA pages, graphics from PNID diagrams using AI. I have seen, or we've had conversations about auto-generated from PNID diagrams in the past. I don't know if they were SCADA. I don't know if they were SCADA or otherwise. Certainly like HMI drawings. I think it'll be interesting. I think that it's a good first step, which is basically what I say to all of these things, Sammy. I think that it's a good first step in like many of these processes, but it's only the first step. A lot of the value that I see from the drawings, the designs, the user interfaces are understanding the process, and it's more than just a straight PNID. We've also got a comment from Chris, but I don't know if you have a comment on Sammy's comment, Vlad.
I think it makes sense, right? I think if you can extract data easier, but again, I'm not even sure that's. I guess maybe it is pure AI, but and maybe it's correlating different drawings into
Mhm.
what makes sense on the SCADA screen. I'd be curious to see what the algorithm truly is, right? I think you can parse PNID diagrams depending
Mhm.
on what the software to design them is. And you should be able to, in theory, again, if it's like valves, if it's like pumps,
Mhm.
if it's, like tanks, you should already be able to pull and design like a fairly basic SCADA screen. So, like I said, maybe it's a interesting tool. I'd question then what the complexity, of that PNID um, SCADA screen would be, right? Because I think there's
Mhm.
going to always be this breaking point, which is a question mark. But I think it's only going to get better, right? At the end of the day, if it is something useful today for maybe smaller systems, then it's slowly going to get better, better, and ultimately become even more useful in the future. I'll pull up this
Absolutely.
comment from Chris. So he's talking about, and I know Dave, like you've done a lot of SCADA design and you work with groups that do that. Again, I don't know if you have any personal experience where they've used AI. I'm not sure at this stage there's a lot of savings, but curious maybe what you think.
On my side, so I've done a bunch of SCADA. I haven't done any SCADA that we used like AI or tools like that for the final product. But Vlad, who is it that we had on? Oh man, who is it we had on? He was talking about a variety of different Siemens tools, and there was a tool that Siemens has that basically pulls screen layouts that pulls screen layouts from there. He was
It might
from a
have been Colm
Siemens.
because I think like Colm talked about different
Cole might have talked
integrated
about it. He
tools,
was
right?
from a Siemens distributor. He's from a Siemens distributor in Texas. I am blanking on his name. We will have to
Matt,
go. Matt,
Matt,
yes, Matt Paulson.
Matt Paulson. He's in Texas. I thought he was in Carolinas, either south or
I
north.
don't know.
Anyways,
Yes, but no, Matt also talked. Matt also talked a bunch about that.
mhm.
If you guys give me a second,
So I guess I'll read Chris's comments. So use
yes.
cases TBD. Remember the spreadsheet was designed around the accounting ledger, but only took off when engineering started using it with formulas, etc. I think that's an interesting example, right? And I'm not saying that we're not going to find use cases. I think there's tons of companies, I think even more than we probably need, investigating LLMs and trying to create different tooling in the not only industrial space, right, but in all kinds of different industries. I think it's interesting to see what comes out of it. I guess my comment is more so at this stage, I've not seen something like tangible in production yet that delivers. Again, maybe it needs to benchmark also against the accuracy of a human being because at the end of the day, even we can make mistakes. So I think it would be almost a bad example to give when AI makes, let's say, one mistake out of
Mhm.
10 replies or one out of 100. So we need to maybe figure out what makes sense and what doesn't. So I'm saying that there's definitely potential, but we'll see how it comes up. And I see that Dave pulled up the episode.
Yeah, Matt Paulison, episode 112, for all of our podcast listeners. Definitely talks about a tool. He even has the name of the Siemens tool that he was using to go kind of fast build a bunch of those screens. Again, I don't remember if it was SCADA or HMI or both, but Matt absolutely talks about it. And so there have been tools around. I have not personally used them for especially final builds. I have certainly used and played around with tools for efficacy. Yeah, for efficacy in the past, but absolutely always interested in kind of learning more and seeing kind of where the auto generation versus the value is. Vlad, I want to move past this, and before we get into specific shows, and if you guys have questions about specific shows or questions about kind of AI or questions about any of these things, absolutely let us know. But I want to go do kind of a quick round robin on like plus and minuses of 2023 versus 2024 first half for overall shows for both of us. Kind of hit on things we did better and maybe some top recommendations if folks are going to a show in the next few weeks, still for the first half of the season, or they're planning to go hit one of the majors in the second half of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest, I guess, from the show perspective, if I can
Mm.
kick us off, the biggest difference is it felt bigger, right? I don't know if it
Okay.
was the venue. I don't know. And I think they've mentioned it was a 30 to 40% increase in at least registrations
Okay.
on one of the memos that they put out. That's A3. So I don't know if they did more marketing. I don't know if people really saw the hype in Automate last year, because
Yep.
I think a lot of us, and not just you and I, but a lot of groups within our circles have been sharing a ton of content from that
Mhm.
trade show, including leading up to Automate of this year. So I think the overall show appeared bigger, right? And that's in
Mhm.
terms of like space, in terms of attendance. I felt that the booths were bigger. And again, a year went by. I've had a lot of different changes in my life, so maybe that's just
Mhm.
my perspective. But the official, like I said, numbers that I've heard is 30 to 40% higher
Okay.
registration numbers. I don't know if they've confirmed any like attendance numbers. So that's, take that for what it is. How about you?
I think they released registration numbers. I'm not sure I've heard a show confirm attendance numbers.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've heard that. I would say I agree. Booths were bigger. I feel like we almost felt like it was further or bigger because where I was staying at the hotel, if we walked indoors, was like almost half a mile, like almost an entire kilometer for all of our non-Americans listening away. And so Vlad and I walked that a couple of times, and then realized the outside walk was, I don't know, like 300 yards. Yeah, it was like what was much shorter, and so we did that much quicker walk. The booths were absolutely bigger, especially the ones that we spent time at. Yeah, the booths were absolutely bigger. The ones that we spent time at. I thought overall, they generally looked as good, if not better, than they did the year before. I felt like we saw fewer booths that were like kind of the standard 10 by 10s. I feel like we saw more people who were bringing more people. They were bringing more displays. That they were kind of just bringing more this year than we saw last year at Automate. I feel like last year at Automate we saw a bunch of kind of smaller booths, kind of all the way up and down the outside, and so I thought that was good. I guess kind of on things we did better. I liked staying closer to the show. I thought it was nice just being able to go walk. I thought it was nice being able to go leave the stuff and go get lunch. Um, at the hotel or in the hotel room or kind of any of those things. I will say for me, one of the things that I appreciated that Vlad and I did is that we had fewer set commitments every day, which was nice because it meant we got to see a whole bunch more booths. Yeah, we got to see a whole bunch more booths and we got to see a whole lot more people. And I would say, kind of overall, one of my favorite things about Hanover and about Automate is I got to meet a bunch of people who I hadn't met before. And I got to see even more people that I have seen in other shows and get to see a bunch of people for other times. It's really awesome, especially with me in a super bright shirt, with people coming up and saying hi. That is always great. I would say kind of the one downside is that my list of people I want to see in booths I want to see is like ever growing, Vlad, and at some point I just absolutely 100% run out of time. So
Yeah.
the one downside is you can't make it everywhere, which is why kind of my recommendation is go pick the booth or the people, go set the meetings that are important to you. Keep it as small of a number as you possibly can every day, and then go be able to learn or explore or any of those other things, because there are just way too many things to do. There is so this year they had the theater, which was I think open to everyone, where they were having like bunch of roundtables and stuff that we walked by a couple of times but did not see at all. And then they had all of like the speaking sessions that were in other rooms that for the second year in a row, Vlad and I did not have kind of the full conference pass to be able to go see. But honestly, it wouldn't have really mattered because we were from like 10 a.m. Or from 9 o'clock in the morning to about like 5:30 or 6 o'clock at a minimum. I felt like we were very committed overall. I would also say kind of a top thing, a thing that I really enjoyed and kind of a recommendation for folks who might be going to shows is figure out where the networking or other
Nope. Looks like we have
or hours. Oh, am I back?
Dave. Looks like we almost lost you.
Oh, okay.
I was going
I
to
was
take
I
over
was
for just a sec.
I was gonna say I was talking Vlad, and then I saw a brief blip of sorry we've lost you. But what was I going to say? But no, so I would say networking, right? So if you guys are going to these events, it's great to be able to go have the conversations at the booths, but go figure out where the networking events are. So Automate, the first night has a big networking event. That was a lot of fun. My only comment was the room wasn't quite large enough for all of the people, all of us that were at the event. We saw, I don't know, dozens of people. In fact, I saw some people at that event that I didn't see the rest of the show. And then on Tuesday, there was the Sassy Happy Hour and there was a Manufacturing Happy Hour. And both of those were absolutely super fun events. And so if you guys are going to a show, figure out where the after hours stuff is. Um, and yes, figure out where the after hours stuff is. There is after hours stuff sometimes on the show floor, lots of times beyond the show floor. And kind of my recommendation for everyone, Vlad, is if you've got a super limited budget and you're an exhibitor, go save the money that you would spend of putting up a booth and just go bring your clients to like a super fun after hours networking happy hour of some sort or dinner. Money well spent because people absolutely remember that.
I guess, like, the only item I will add to that, and I think it goes back to proximity, but also networking, right? I
Mhm.
enjoyed, like, the breakfasts because I think even though, let's say, I wasn't eating, I would still spend
Yeah.
the time with people, and it's a bit more relaxed, right? Because I think
Hmm.
at the trade show, there's no really place to kind of sit down unless you're outside, and it's these kind of like awkward standing
Hmm.
tables, and maybe you can stand with someone for like 10 minutes.
Yep.
But I think, in 2023, we were quite a bit of ways from
Hmm.
Automate. So we would just drive in and sort of get onto the show floor versus, this time, I think we would spend an hour, sometimes like an hour and a half,
Hmm.
sort of grabbing breakfast or coffee with different people we knew. And it would be almost a different crew every single
Hmm.
day. So I think that's another opportunity, even for OEMs or people representing, especially smaller companies, to sort of
Hmm.
connect with people and, hey, like, let's grab breakfast tomorrow, let's grab a coffee, whatever that may be. And I think it's a lot more relaxed again than trying to figure that out at the conference. And they had tables, right? We were there,
Hmm.
I think, like, once, where you could go on the mezzanine and there's like better seating arrangements. But even
Yep.
then, it felt like a bit more noisy. It felt like, there was time to be better spent on the show floor. So it
Hmm.
was it was very different. So I think for me, the big takeaway is to try and schedule like more breakfasts slash like early coffees with people at these events.
Absolutely. And I will piggyback that saying breakfast or coffee is an awesome time, especially if it's a late show start like Automate is at 10 a.m. If it's like an early show start at like a Hanover and the show starts at 9, but everyone starts queuing up at 8. Unless they're at your hotel, sometimes that is difficult in order to go get set up, but absolutely go kind of take and do your best to pre-plan those meals and those meal times. That again for me is critical. And as Vlad said, you get to have those different conversations. They're always more fun, less what are you seeing at the show and all of these things, and more kind of everything else about life. I am going to take that and go transition us into kind of some of my experiences from Hannover Messe. So I was back again this year. I was only back for like a day and a half. It was a super. It was a lot of fun. I spent a bunch of time in the Harding booth, as I said. I got to meet a bunch of those people. For me, the German trade shows, and I think Vlad and I said this when we were at SPS or kind of our post SPS show, is I feel like in Europe, those trade shows, especially the big ones, are very much like your automation fair. For Rockwell in the US, you have lots of engineers, right? Like you have the heads of departments because it is a super critical show. You've got the heads of departments, you've got the owners of companies, You've got the CEOs. As to if you can get to them or they're booked every 15 minutes for the entirety of the week is a different question. But you are right there. And if you're looking to go have a conversation with someone, it's a really good opportunity to go have the conversation, especially at some of the bigger shows. So that was good. It was slightly less overwhelming this year, Vlad, but it's still absolutely overwhelming. I think there it was like, I don't know, 15 or 18 times the size of what we saw at the McCormick Center was the entirety of Hannover Messe. And Hanover is
15
one of,
times?
oh, absolutely, yes. So like the building that Harding Technology Group was in was at least as large as the room in the McCormick Center that we had. It
What
was
are they showing?
that's everything. So they were there. ePlan probably had like a 200 by 200 foot booth. They're like huge booths. The booths, in fact, are so large, like you can't even they wouldn't fit in a bunch of the places that we see in the U.S., which is what I tell all of the Germans. And so I feel like it was slightly less overwhelming. I got to at least walk through a bunch of different interesting areas that I didn't last year. So there was a bunch, even more electric vehicle, even more battery this year than there was last year. There was a lot of sustainability. There was a lot of what we've seen both Phoenix and Harding call the all electric society, which I think is really interesting. Kind of
Well, looks like we've lost Dave once again. We'll wait for him to come back.
oh, am I
That'd be
back,
there
Vlad?
he is. There he is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. For whatever reason, my internet connection does not like me. Hold on a sec. I'm gonna go pause my live LinkedIn feed. I won't be able to go see the live LinkedIn comments, but hopefully we will not have that issue again. But no, I was saying I got to go see a bunch of different things. We see a lot of sustainability. We see a lot of hydrogen, which is of interest to me. We see a lot of electric, which is absolutely of an interest. You get to see kind of everyone bringing out the things that they will be bringing to market over the next 6 to 24 months, which I think is absolutely always fun when we're going about that. But again, it's just so big. I lost my voice like Wednesday afternoon, which is why I wasn't on Manufacturing Hub with Vlad on that Wednesday, because I just there was no voice left. And so for me, it was absolutely a lot of fun. I will 100% plan on. See, Amanda's in the comments talking about the Hanover Messe grounds are enormous.
Well, look, the important question, Dave, for I guess for
Yes.
the listeners, are you committed to getting us as manufacturing hub to Hanover Messe in 2025? That's the important question.
Oh, that is a good question, Vlad. As I told you, that Canada is the partner country for Hannover Messe 2025. And you just need to start saying some nice things about Justin Trudeau, and maybe we can be part of the Canadian delegation. You can wear your various colors of blue suits and stand next to Justin Trudeau on his victory lap. On his victory lap in there. But no, I think it would be fun. I think that we will absolutely go kind of figure out what that looks like as we go try to figure out what 2025 is. I'm still trying to figure out what June of 2024 looks like for about half of it
Fair
at
enough.
this point, Vlad. But no, I think we will absolutely go figure out what that looks like. I think that would be a lot of fun. Absolutely something that I want to go back to, if only to visit friends that I get to see there over and over again. But talking about visiting friends, even more friends that I got to go see in Germany. We got to go see, was it just last week at Automate? Vlad, I feel like Automate was either yesterday and we just got back from the airplane ride, or was like 2 months ago, and I'm still trying to go figure it out. I feel like I just talked to everyone a bunch about Hanover. What are your kind of like top thoughts on Automate, maybe Automate 2023 versus 2024 that we haven't already talked about?
that we haven't already talked about. I think it was a great event. I enjoyed it a lot more than I guess my memory of 2023. As you
Okay.
mentioned, I think we made less commitments, so we got to see a lot more. We got to talk to groups that we didn't have like very set appointments with, right? And so
Hmm.
we could just casually explore what kind of solutions they had to offer. So I thought that was really cool, and I definitely would like to do more of that. I
Hmm.
would say maybe on the same side, I would have liked to have captured a bit more video, and I think it's difficult to, at least with the current setup that we have, to move all of that stuff around for capturing what we would like. So I think we're going to both look into maybe more portable solutions, but ultimately, I think there were a ton of really cool demos all over the place and a lot of really interesting people to talk to. And I think if we want to maybe get into the specifics, let's skip the point of talking about the marketing approach to later, but I guess the booths we visited. I think we have a pretty extensive list, and I'm just going to list all of them, and then maybe we can discuss some of the things we've seen right after. But we've been to many booths this year, right? So Siemens, Scopia, Harding USA, Vention, Captron, Festo, Future Robotics, Sassy, Igus, Azrael, SDA, NVIDIA, United Robotics Group, UR/MIR. They had a co-booth together. Phoenix
No, Vlad,
Contact,
I was corrected. We pronounce it Mir.
Mir. That's right, Mir.
I've always read it MIR. I've never said it out loud until I was at the booth, and they told me we pronounce it Mir. So
I
we will
remember.
at
I
least,
remember that conversation. I think the
yes,
cautious way is always to spell out the acronyms, right? Because
I
that's how they write it.
100%
But yes,
agree.
it is what it is. Phoenix
Yep.
Contact. I think that got auto corrected. It was like Nuvi or something of that nature. It was like the
Yeah.
largest booth at Automate with the humanoids. I think you took a
Hmm.
photo of me with one of them. And then last couple of booths were Inductive Automation, Sepasoft, and Opto 22.
Hmm.
I saw all kinds of very interesting solutions at all of them. I think we have a
Yes.
couple of videos that will be released, if not next week, but within a couple of weeks for sure with Siemens, Scopia, and a few other conversations. I also have some
Hmm.
posts planned about some of the things, at least that I've seen. I've done a bit of research, at least more so than I was told about single pair Ethernet. So I
Okay.
was a little bit curious about that. So I am
It's a deep, deep rabbit hole, Vlad.
I look, my first impressions, if I guess if we brought that up, it's I think it's an interesting solution. I think it's certainly a lot more applicable to verticals that I necessarily have not worked in.
Hmm.
It is very extensively used, or I guess will be used in oil and gas, where runs of many feet and or meters are important.
Yep.
In food and bev, as you've seen also in your experience, the runs of Ethernet cables are fairly short. So I
Hmm.
think there's some value it can add. But my opinion is that you don't save that much money on the cables because usually it's the labor that's going to be
Yeah.
a lot more expensive on
Hmm.
of running those cables. So, anyways, like I said, I have some posts on different things that will be coming out.
Hmm.
And I think we've talked to a lot of the people on the podcast, right? Another example I'll
Yep.
bring up is Chris Savoya from UR. He's the head of platform. I think it's a longer title, but long story short,
Head
he's the
of
head of
partnership
ecosystem.
ecosystems or something like that.
Yeah. So I think there's some interesting plays, and you and I talked a little bit about
Yeah.
that offline. Vention's trying to have a play on that side. I think Fanuc also has some things. So I have some opinions on how I think these ecosystems or platform are going to evolve. So
Let me throw my comments out here about single pair
sure.
Ethernet.
Yeah.
Let me get my thoughts on SP out, and then we can go and kind of continue the conversation. So, on my side, Vlad, I love the concept of single pair Ethernet. Um, I kind of similar to you, don't see a bunch of one-to-one applications, right? So, single pair Ethernet allows you to have, I think it's like 5 volts or 7.2 volts up to 1,000 meters, which is 330
That's all the voltage they can get?
feet.
I thought it
Well,
was the specs
up
is
to
16
1,000
amps.
meters. I think they can get
Yeah.
up to like 15 volts at 500 meters or something along there with the current iteration of SPE. But I mean, if you're running sensors or an IP camera or something like that. I believe the conversation that we had. And if there are any SP experts in here, please feel free to fact check me in the comments. I know that the longer run has a smaller voltage, about half of what the 500-meter run is. But I mean, 1,000 meters is a huge run, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 1,000 meters is a huge run. And if you can go run everything just through the SPE and you don't have to worry about running that and 12 volts or that and 120 volts, it could, in theory, let a technician go do the run because it's just Ethernet as opposed to having to have an electrical person come in. So I think that there are certainly benefits on there. I had a bunch of conversations and have had a number of conversations while I've been in Germany about single pair Ethernet because it's mostly the Germans who are very much kind of where single pair Ethernet came out of and kind of where I saw it first at Hannover Messe 2023. And a lot of their comments are something to the effect of, I think there is more adoption in Europe than there is in the Americas at the moment, but there is a fair amount of adoption in the Americas, and it's one of those things that if it's valuable to you, you probably know about it and or are looking to use it and work on it. I don't see a ton of marketing in the Americas for it, or maybe it's just that it's not necessarily targeted at me and kind of the things that I look at and am interested in, but I love the concept. There have been lots of times where putting sensors or other things in a particular place were just too expensive because you also had to run power up there. So if we can go put sensors or other things 3,000 feet away, then I feel like it opens up lots of different opportunities. So on the single pair Ethernet side, I'm interested. Honestly, Vlad, I'd love to have an application that I could go run something 1,000 meters and figure out what that looks like. I just don't necessarily have a lot of applications. That would have to be like a personal life application, and then I'd have to figure out what I'm running 1,000 meters
Yeah.
as a
And
test.
I think it becomes like a two-sided challenge, right? If you don't
Yep.
have the sensors, and that's the problem also with power over Ethernet, right? Like I think in
Yep.
theory it sounds great because then you
Yep.
don't need power supplies. You can just send it over the switch. But the
Yep.
reality is there's not that many sensors, and usually they cost quite a bit more because of the low volume of production. And
Mm-hmm.
so the same thing here, which I guess like the other thing that I'm also surprised is that they use very different connectors, and I guess it's probably so that you don't plug it in attentively to into a normal switch where single pair Ethernet is just not going to work. But I
Yep.
think it creates a challenge where now you need these new sensors, right? And maybe to your point, there's just a converter from that, let's say 12 volts or 5
Mm-hmm.
volts to 24.
Mm-hmm.
But it becomes a little bit more, I think, clunky than what I would like to see, which is that, it's running over the same Ethernet cable and it just like plugs in at the end and it's
Yeah.
just a better version of PoE, but it's not the case, right? So, anyways, I think, like I said, there's a lot of discussions to be had on these. I think
Yeah.
maybe we will have an expert in what are the themes, educate and maybe debate with us
Ooh.
around some of these topics. But
I would say for me, if I can have the last comment on single pair Ethernet, I think it's a lot like we're seeing this in the very early stages, and I think there's a single pair Ethernet V2 or Gen 2 coming out, and there might be a couple of groups with like competing thoughts on single pair Ethernet, and kind of the direction that we're going. So I think it's still early. I would say in many cases, I'm not sure that I guess we in the Americas generally see things when they're products as opposed to when they're concept and early like beta stage products. And this still feels a bit early for mass production and mass utilization, especially in like a food and bev plant. Like at some point, why would I go opt to have a single pair Ethernet at a run of call it 100 meters or 200 meters as opposed to running a normal Ethernet cable and 12 volt or 24 volt or whatever that looks like, or going and finding somewhere close to a already existing electrical line, right? So on those sides, I feel like that there's probably a number of meters in which it makes more sense. I just don't think that we've necessarily hit the mass adoption stage. But I think it's really interesting to be able to go talk about it now before we hit the mass adoption stage so that we can be kind of on the early ends. So that we can be on the early ends of this, and hopefully on the show continue to follow it through. I mean, who knows, Vlad? Maybe episode 500. We're talking about what fools we were in episode 163 that we just didn't 100% buy into single pair Ethernet because the entire backplane of your office is just running SPE.
Right, and look, at the end of the day, I think the groups who are developing this, at the end of the day, they're talking to probably customers and users,
Mm-hmm.
so they see what is important for those verticals, and maybe it's just you and I have not seen
Yep.
those use cases yet. So I'm sure they're trialing, like they're developing different things, so something will come out of it. And if not, it's going to benefit at the very least the current technology. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's going to be interesting to see how it evolves for sure. I think let's move along. I think one comment I will make on the Siemens side. I really like the conversation with Rafa. I don't know if you remember. We talked to him about the vibration sensing, but also the
Digital
capabilities,
drivetrain.
digital drivetrain, right? But I would say that that maybe keyword is less important to me
Okay.
than what the tech brings, right? And at the end of the day, it was a servo drive running a motor. It could
Mm-hmm.
have been a VFD. I think we had some questions. There was a
No, the
servo, but
VFDs
the
were
motor,
behind it.
right? But I guess, anyways, there was maybe a little bit of confusion because normally you put vibration sensors on VFDs since your servo motors typically have some of that integrated inside. But anyways, I think what was interesting to see is how capable some of those drives are becoming, and I think they had a very and this is maybe also a segue into the next point, but we can I can give a brief mention of this. Is he was showing us like the trends, getting them from the real system. He was explaining where the sensors are mounted. He was explaining like why you were getting certain harmonics, why you were getting like those values from the sensors on the motor back into the interface. I thought that was really interesting, right? I think those are the kinds of applications and I guess demos that I would like to see more of
Mm-hmm.
at the trade shows. But Dave, what were your thoughts maybe on Siemens or some other booths?
Thought the vibration sensing was interesting. I know that you and I have debated on and off stream for hours as to the validity of vibration sensing. I guess I want to bring up one point because it wasn't just the vibration sensing, but it was like a back end in which it could say, hey, because we've done this particular thing, it ran it through. I don't know if it was an algorithm. I forget the word. I would have to go back and read the video. I wasn't prepared to have an in-depth conversation on this, Vlad.
It was
So
AI,
thank you.
Dave. It was AI.
I don't think you I don't think we use the word AI, but because of the vibration and how the vibration was, it could sense that it was like this particular type of issue and could go drive people past like level 1 through 3 or 1 through 4 of vibration, like human vibration analysis, in order to say, hey, go check this particular thing. So for me, I thought that that was really interesting. Yeah, I thought that that was very interesting, and it's very interesting to see kind of the direction that we continue to move on vibration and other analysis.
Yeah. I think the other really cool thing that I thought was really done well was by Captron, right? And it was not because you visited them,
It's
because they've
because they
also
gave you
printed.
stuff, Vlad.
Well, it's not only that, right? They gave stuff to people who had not necessarily built maybe the same level of relationship as you've had with the German folks. They've
Mm-hmm.
also printed stuff for some of our, I guess, colleagues, and I think that
Yeah,
was really cool, right? They gave us a technical. So here's the button I have with the manufacturing hub logo, and I think the glare makes it a little bit difficult to see, but I
yeah, it
think if
does.
you
Can you hold it square? Can you hold
uh
it more square to the camera?
I think the camera's just not
Yeah, the
that great.
camera.
But anyways, you can see that it switches from this like yellow to orange. I think that's the
Yep.
best maybe view of it. But anyways, the point I'm trying to make is I think that the demos at trade shows, right, and
Mm-hmm.
even the giveaways, at the end of the day, most of the people visiting these booths are engineers or probably early to mid managers that are
Yep.
still fairly technical and understand what's going on. And I think my takeaway, besides what we've discussed, like the proximity of the hotels and whatnot, I think it's giving people the technical solutions that solve their problems versus trying to maybe embellish the demos, right? And what I mean by that is, like, I'll give one example. I think like one of the robotic booths, and although it was like a cool demo, had this like drum set, and I thought it was just,
Yes.
it was like, sure, I think you and I both understand you can move drums on a robot arm, right? But it doesn't, like, it impresses me from like, oh, like it's a cool thing, but it doesn't
Mhm.
impress me from like the, let's say, the precision of that robot, or maybe the adaptability of that robot to an industrial application. So I think what I'm trying to say is, and the same could be said again, let's say you have a software tool, right? So a lot of
Mhm.
times software is just being displayed as a conversation with whomever either not necessarily even built the software, right? But someone who's marketing the software. But me as an engineer, I want to come to the booth and I want to experience the tool that you've built, whether that is on a laptop, whether that is on some kind of
Mhm.
a virtual environment. I want to be able to see how does it fit into a industrial application solution
Mhm.
versus, being told a lot of the, let's call it, the marketing or even the features of that tool alone, right? So I think why like Captron was interesting, not only because they gave us something away,
Mhm.
but it's the actual buttons that they sell and use, and they show
Mhm.
it in their demos. And now I'm going to connect to it. I'm going to try and figure out how to talk to it over the protocol, and you know what I mean, like I
Yeah.
have something to experience the product versus, they could have just shown the video and been like, well, like, Vlad, like, trust us, we have buttons in buses, and
Trust the
that's great.
buttons. That they do have buttons on buses, Vlad. I have seen the buttons on buses. In fact, I've seen like nearly 20-year-old buttons on buses, which is just wild to continue to see them work. But
Right.
no. I would also say in regards to your comments of technical demos, absolutely 100%. Your engineering nerd is showing is showing here, Vlad. It's not a bad thing. It is not a bad thing, but I think again it is interesting. Kind of the U.S. shows versus the international shows. I think that we see a different mix of shows and kind of demos from different people. But I think it's important to I think it is important to be able to see both sides of kind of like the fun marketing things, but also the engineering side of that. Again, we'll shout out Captron. Thank you guys so much for the buttons. Thank you guys so much for coming on Manufacturing Masterclass. If you guys haven't seen or followed Captron, be sure to go ahead. They've got them printing. So Vlad and I got buttons. The automation ladies got buttons. Chris Lukey and Manufacturing Happy Hour got buttons. Jake and the Manufacturing Millennial got buttons. Jordan Yates got buttons, and I think there are a couple more. I think there are a couple more as well that you guys will have to stay tuned in order to go see. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I just want everyone to picture convincing a whole bunch of engineers that we need to completely remove part of the protocol in order to go print buttons for random American influencers. I am shocked and like super happy that those turned out as well as they did. And you guys will 100% see more of that. If you guys want to see the button in action and you are on LinkedIn, on my LinkedIn profile, I posted a video of Vlad plugging in the button and touching a couple of those the first time, which was super fun. But no, I agree. I think that the more you can go draw people into the booth, the more interesting it was. The German company, I can't even pronounce it, the one with the humanoid robots, Vlad. I would say they had one of the least technical demos that you and I queued in line for like 10 minutes to go get a selfie taken with the humanoid robot. So I would say, yes, technical demos are awesome, but sometimes you just need a selfie station with a, random humanoid robot, and engineers will go queue up in order to do that. But no, I think it's interesting. I think that we saw more and different. I guess let's go shout out a couple of booths that I thought did really well, especially this year versus last year. And I think I made comments to a bunch of these groups that I really liked what they did. I liked what Phoenix Contact did. They went from a much smaller booth to a much larger booth. And then I also liked what Siemens did, both for similar reasons, right? It felt like the European design and kind of a bunch of the minimalism and what you would expect from the European shows absolutely continued into what you would see and expect in the U.S. Right, there's still the U.S. flavor and flair of everything, but I really liked kind of the continuation of thought and theme when it came to that. And then I also told the Copia folks I love what they did with their booth. It felt much larger than it did last year, even though they were kind of a very similar size. Yeah, even though they were a very similar size. What else? Any other things that we want to talk about the booth that we visited, Vlad?
Um, well, like I said, I think we had good conversations with people in all of the booths that we've mentioned. Maybe
Absolutely.
a couple that stand out. I think the demos with the mobile robots were pretty cool. So that was UR,
Hmm.
Mir, and also the United Robotics Group. I think that
Yes.
those. So like again, going back to the previous point, I think it's always obviously important to have like a cool aspect, but I think
Hmm.
it cannot stand on its own, right? So going back to that like humanoid robot, yes, we
Hmm.
queued up because we wanted the selfie because it's something novel, it's something we've not seen
Yes.
before. But the chances of me having understood, the capabilities of that robot and calling them to, hey, I want to bring this into my facility are fairly small, right? Versus if I understand and if I'm there for the technical capabilities, it could be as impressive as it gets. And again, I refer to that like drum set demo. It's sure maybe it draws some attention, but it's not going to help me answer the question, is that the robot, let's say, system that I'm going to prefer? And let's be honest, on the robotic side, I think there's a lot of options, right? The truth
Hmm.
is, even I would say that I don't fully understand all the nuances and differences in, let's call it, precision and, let's say, payload capability of the like 10 if not more vendors that are selling the same or seemingly same robotic arm, right? So I think that showcasing how you are different and why the customer needs to make the decision with you, or I guess purchase your equipment versus just showcasing a stunt, is extremely critical. And obviously that I think is part of it, but
Hmm.
it is important to figure out a differentiator. Booths that
Absolutely.
stood
And
out, I
then
guess. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, if I can kind of continue on that thought, I thought it's very interesting how we see Automate as a North American show kind of in the middle of this metamorphosis. And I don't know if it was intentional or otherwise, but like 8 or 10 years ago, people would ask me if I'm going to Automate, and it was described as literally the big robotic show, or I mean, at that point, the big robotic show every other year in Chicago. And it was, if I'm in town, I'll show up for a day to go see the big robots, and it was a lot of fun. Um, Now we absolutely see more software and automation vendors and people showing up, which I think is interesting. I mean, there are a couple. I mean, you are, and then you like the United Robotics Group are absolutely. They sell robots, right? They sell robots. They sell robotic applications. But like the vast majority of the people that we see are all across automation and manufacturing. Yeah, they're kind of all across automation and manufacturing. So it's interesting to see kind of the expansion of what that looks like as much, if not more, of an automation show. I think the branding on at least some of the signage that I saw this year was the largest automation show in North America, something to that extent, or the automation show of North America, something to that extent. So I think that it's interesting, and I am hopeful we will see more of the automation groups continue to come back year after year and take over a larger part of the show. And again, I think the group that did a really good job. Beckoff was front and center. You literally could not walk in through the doors without passing Beckoff in their prototypical Beckoff red, which was super impressive.
Yeah, and to that point, I think you mentioned this early in your comment. There's a lot more presence of software, and I think that you see that on every booth. I think that
Mhm.
even goes to the robotic side, right? A lot of them were showcasing whether that is like AI or platforms or ecosystems,
Yep.
whatever they call them. So there's a huge
Yeah.
emphasis on software, and I will say that and again, I think I mentioned this a little bit. Software is extremely difficult, I think, to demonstrate on the show floor.
Hmm.
And I think that I certainly have like some thoughts on how I would present it, but I think that without a hands-on demo, it becomes a
Hmm.
very difficult sell, right? Because at that point, your marketing or salesperson is just pretty much listing features versus,
Yep.
again, as an engineer from the automation side, I want to be able to, let's say if it's an MES or SCADA or and on board, like whatever that
Hmm.
looks like, I want to be able to come up. I want to be to have like a guided demo, like, hey Vlad, like try and move this box across like the sensor, or try to,
Yep.
like add this tag, or move this value from here to here. And like I said, it's not an easy challenge to solve, but I think those kinds of stations will certainly dominate, at least in my mind, when it comes to demoing tools in person, right? And of course, you can follow up with a like a trial license, depending on what you're offering to that same person to go and test it out on their own.
Absolutely. I'd say to that point, I think you can go one of two ways. I think you can go all out to try to virtualize the demo that you're showing. And I feel like Colm, Gavin, and the Siemens folks on the process automate, and Colm's going to kill me because I can never remember all of them. I apologize immensely, Colm. But like the process automate and the NX and a number of those pieces of software, right? They've got, I don't know, 10 feet, maybe 15 feet of different boards, of different like TV monitors. And I feel like they do a good job of showcasing visually what that
Sure.
looks like.
Yeah.
I think you can, in theory, go even further out and do what we saw, what Vlad and I saw at the SPS. So if we've got the video boards in the back, and then we've got like the demo mock-up of the line in the middle, and then we've got another board that goes and slides and is just the craziest thing that you can see in any American show ever. But I think you could, I think you go that route of we want to go show you everything, or I think you can go kind of the other route of what we saw with like the inductive Sepasoft Octa 22 booth of we've got people, we're here to go have conversations with you. You probably know us. Maybe you've got some questions. Maybe you don't know us, and we'll go take you over to kind of our smaller, let's go walk you through this demo. And maybe we've got a television on the demo board. I feel like you can go one of two ways. It's really a function of how much time, money, effort, size of booth you're going to have. And I feel like kind of the in the middle of that is just kind of is like the valley of we're spending a whole bunch of money and maybe we don't have a bunch of additional outcome. It's we drive people to the booth to go have conversations, open the laptop, show them the demo. Maybe we set up another demo if that's what they want on the outside, or we're here to kind of like visually shock you and say, "Oh my goodness, this is really interesting. Come tell me more." Right? Like I think if you've got all of your simulation up on the wall, that is going to draw more people in, but that is also a lot more time, money, labor, all of those things intensive than it is to go ahead and go drive people towards your booth and kind of go have those more intimate conversations.
I mean, look, the plug I'll make is if you guys want an interesting demo that will drive people to your booth, come and talk to us. I'm not sure we will commit to
Come and talk
building
to
the
us.
demo, but we might be able to come up with a concept that we again could subcontract different groups to go and build out. Again, I'm just speaking from I think there's a missed opportunity at some of these booths, and again, that's just my opinion. I think that engineers want to see more from a lot of these software solutions. I don't think they're easy to demonstrate, as I've mentioned multiple times, but I think there's better ways than at least what I've seen at some of the current booths. And like I said, the door is open. Send us a message, and we'll have a conversation about how to make that happen.
I feel like this is one of those things that Vlad is going to offer that is absolutely going to get us in trouble. But moving on, Vlad, do you have any other thoughts about kind of the major boosts, the major folks that we saw, or any themes of that for Automate?
Maybe one thought, going back to AI and the whole Nvidia situation. I
Okay.
think it's super interesting to see how everyone now seems to have a I guess it's an IPC with an NVIDIA graphics card that does some sort of computing slash processing slash whatever it may be for an AI related application, right? And I think
Yep.
we saw that at the Siemens booth in the form of their like backplane S7 like 1500 type of I guess hardware, and you also
Yeah.
saw that at a bunch of the UR robots, like on the bottom they have like a full rack, which is like a
Hmm.
graphics card for like vision applications.
Hmm.
And again, Dave, I guess like I've not dove deep enough into the technical aspects of what they're actually doing. I understand obviously the applications they've shown. I
Hmm.
don't know exactly what the hardware is being used for and what like I guess like what are the limits, whether that is if that's the right approach or it could be simplified or everything now needs essentially a graphics card. If I'm going to drop a arm for a palletizer at a local manufacturer, do I also need to set up now a rack with a server that has multiple graphics cards to process like boxes or pallets or whatever it's picking and
Hmm.
placing onto the pallet? So I think it was interesting. I think it left me with more questions than I would say like answers. I've
Hmm.
certainly seen some of the applications. I've certainly thought of maybe use cases that it could bring. Right, the Siemens one I think was interesting because you could co-pack a lot of things, and I've worked on. Essentially, PNG had this application where you wanted to merge different types of products into one. Right, so think of a bundle of a product, or you know how you sometimes get an item where um what's a good example, the soap bundles. So I think you get like a bar of soap, you get a deodorant, you get like a shampoo, and you get like a sponge, right?
Yeah.
In like one like gift box. You know what I'm talking about?
Hmm.
They're sold at like Walmart
Yeah.
and other stores. So a lot of those are put together by hand because it's very difficult to pick and place those different items
Hmm.
into like one bundle, or you need very big hoppers that then like merge the lines into one. So I think in those like I want to say niche applications, it would be very interesting to use AI. But like I said, I'm curious to see where the limits lie and what kind of hardware is required and
Hmm.
how easy is it to set up. Because I think we saw when it was already running and it's great
Yeah.
and everything like seems to be fine. But like I said, it left me with questions as to like how it's truly implemented.
Yeah, I think it's all a function of what you want to do with it, right? And I think the easiest applications, the ones that I've seen that are leveraging some of these GPUs, um, are are kind of like inspection and other applications of how can we go train the model quickly. I don't know if you are going to have a robot arm that does the same thing over and over again, or an inspection process that does the same thing over and over again, if you've got to have a honking server with tens of thousands of dollars of GPU. I would imagine not, because I would imagine that would price it out of what it's doing. I have seen some applications. I actually have video that I can go ahead and share with you, Vlad. It's not ready to go live. Otherwise, I would press the go live button. I wish you could set me up for these things. Like, let me know that we're going to have these questions more than 12 seconds before you ask them, and I'll go get some video ready. But like I've seen applications in which it will kind of go quickly train on a, I don't know, $1,000 or a $2,500 box, where we can go train kind of those inspection AI, if you will, and it'll go ahead and train that quickly. I don't know what the GPU looked like on the Siemens robot. Siemens, no, I should get this correct. Siemens Somatic Robot Pick AI. I don't know what the GPU looks like on that. I know that they were mostly running it on an S7 1500, and they had some sort of rack mounted IPC next to it. I don't think we really got in as to what that particular IPC was, but that was very specifically for the brain, the picking brain, as opposed to going and moving the robotic arm. So I don't know what that looks like. I think a lot of that will be dependent, and I'm going to go make a prediction saying that I would imagine lots of people are probably going to be oversizing them today in early 2024. I would imagine by, I don't know, 2026, 2027, we will find a way to perhaps offload a bunch of that processing and that render. If it's going to be the same application over and over again, and maybe have a much smaller chipset with those robotics, and go offload a bunch of that to initial learnings on the cloud. Or maybe we've got one large rack server set up that we do all of the training over the course of the first X number of hours or X number of days. And once we've trained it, the training costs a setup fee, and then we take away the, I don't know, $200,000 rack server, and let it go run on the $2,000 or the $10,000 server, so that you don't need all of that compute power right at the front end.
Yeah, I think I found the brochure, and I guess again, it may not be the exact module. But it's called the Somatic S7 1500 TM NPU for Neural Processing Unit.
Okay.
I think it's hard to say at a glance, what's truly inside. I would assume there's some kind of a graphics card plus a
Yeah.
CPU, but again, like I said, I think the takeaway for me is that it left me with more questions than answers, right? How easy is it to set up? What does the hardware is like what is it actually capable of beyond what we saw? And then ultimately, like how is it even programmed, right? I think we saw a lot of, like I said, functioning units and demos, but
Okay.
I'm not sure as an engineer how you would go about setting them up. So
I think like we should just go clip that, and that should just be like the headline of anyone who wants to know about Manufacturing Hub, is that we talk about applications and we end up that there are more questions on the engineering side than anything else. So there is a really interesting demo that I think is live. If you were to Google, and listeners can go ahead and Google, Siemens has what they call their TensorFlow box, and I'm pretty sure the demo is live, and like the demo of the training is live on video form. Probably not while we're watching this. Probably not while we're watching this, but absolutely something for you to go see. I've seen the demo of it set up, but I haven't seen the demo actually. No, I guess I haven't seen the whole model trained live, but I've seen the end outcome of the trained model being able to go kind of pick yes or no very quickly. But I do want to go ahead and kind of shift this on. Vlad, you've got a bullet point under automate that says logistics.
so this was like logistics, location of the hotel, proximity.
Do we want to share some of those learnings?
I think
I
we did,
know.
no?
Oh, okay. I guess let me go ahead and wrap it up. At Automate 2024, we stayed significantly closer. Well, I stayed a 5-minute walk away. Vlad stayed a slightly longer walk away than we did at Automate 2023. But I feel like Chicago and Detroit are different cities. I don't know how reasonable one could go do that in Detroit, especially just Ubering from the airport, or Vlad taking a very long train ride from the airport. Vlad, to do it again, would you stay close? And would you stay at the hotel attached, or would you stay at the slightly farther, slightly larger apartment that you stayed at?
I think the closer obviously is better, right? I think it just becomes a function of what's available and how
Mm-hmm.
how close to the show you're booking, right? Because prices go up
Absolutely.
pretty quickly. So
That they do. Let's see if Vlad remembers next year when I tell him I've booked 2 hotel rooms. Yes, let's see. Let's see if Vlad remembers next year. Let's see if I remember to book 2 hotel rooms next year, 4 months in advance. You never know. So, last question I want to ask is would you go back? And I guess, would you go to Automate 2025? Automate 2025 will be in Detroit.
yeah, yeah, let's make it happen.
Good. No, I think that will be fun. My hope is that Automate is maybe closer towards the end of May, so there's not like 7 days between the end of Hannover and the beginning of Automate. That was a lot of that was just a lot. I guess I had here best swag, but Vlad, I feel like you pulled up the Captron buttons. That was probably the best swag that was received. Okay, we got
I
some
thought this was
hats.
pretty cool, right? So this was hat from David Turner.
Yep,
It says
absolutely.
automate or die if you
I
cannot
like
read it
that.
well enough.
As
I think
David
it's really
said,
cool. Huh?
when he handed it out, he feels like he should have branded it, and I absolutely 100% agree. He should have branded it.
Yeah.
but I like that. Do you have the Igus hat sitting next to you as well?
Yep.
We got a couple of hats. I love that hat because it's orange, and pretty much everyone knows that orange is just the color of things that I can't say no to. We also got a keychain that Vlad kept in his pocket. Do you still have it in your pocket, Vlad?
I have it somewhere. I have it in my coat, I think, from Automate.
Perfect. We had that. I got this super cool ruler when I was at Hanover from the NVIDIA folks from one of the groups that I was with. It's like a printed circuit board. And I'm going to go here. So
When
it's
do you
kind of
use
cool.
SMD components?
What?
When do you use surface mount components?
I mean, I don't. It's just a ruler, Vlad. And it's a
What do you mean
pretty
just
cool.
a ruler? That's
It's
to
a
measure
ruler.
the. It's
It's
for when you
literally a ruler.
design printed circuit boards.
Yes, but no. My comment is I think it's cool because it's got both millimeters and inches. I don't think I own something that has both millimeters and inches on it.
Fair enough.
I think it will
Um,
get hung up somewhere.
the other
Um,
cool thing that I got, which I don't have on the desk right now, is a Raspberry Pi, which was very
yeah,
interesting, right? So Raspberry Pi, and I mean, they've made a couple of changes recently where they've pulled some interesting company restructuring where it went from
they went
you know
public, right?
I guess I don't know if they went public. I think they're restructuring to go public. If that was maybe I'm not remembering that correctly. But anyways, they did not have a booth at Automate, but they had, I guess, reps. I didn't get the actual position of the person that spoke to me, but I did get a Raspberry Pi, which I thought was really cool. Right. So again, I think it's know your audience. At the end of the day, I
Vlad
probably
loves
will.
swag.
Huh?
You love swag.
Well, it's swag, but it's like swag that I will actually use in development. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if you can't see it on the cameras right now, but I have three Raspberry Pis next to me. I have
Only
one
three?
running 3D
I thought.
printer.
Did you get rid of a couple of? I thought you had five earlier.
I have five. They're like I was saying, one is like
Okay.
next to the printer, and one
Okay.
is used for home automation. It's like on my desk.
Cool. So I will say, I did read it earlier. Raspberry Pi, the UK-based computer maker of low-cost computers, has confirmed plans to go public on the London Stock Exchange
Yeah.
with an IPO. That was apparently 5 hours ago. Apparently, I saw it earlier today, but before I went live. I think it'll be interesting. As we had long discussions at Automate, hopefully it will allow them to increase enough capital in order to go ahead and produce boards because I know they were struggling. I may have to go buy some number of boards if I can go find them, so I can have some pre-IPO boards, which is what I generally do. I generally go buy things pre-IPO and or pre-private equity, having purchased the organization. I find that many times the quality of those things is better. But Vlad, we plugged the Manufacturing Hub YouTube channel. Plug the other channel.
Which out of this channel?
The one that you talk all about Raspberry Pis.
Oh, Solus PLC.
No, the other channel.
Which channel?
The first
Enthusiast?
channel that what? The first channel that
Ian.
you built that got 40,000 subs.
Oh, well, I also talk about Raspberry Pis on Solus PLC.
Okay.
But it's interesting. They actually have the IPO documents released as of the 15th May, so that's today,
Today, yeah.
2024. So I guess like they are now obliged to disclose. I don't see if they have full financials. Actually, I think they do.
They
Fiscal year
would.
2021, 2022, 2023. So anyways, I think look, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I personally think it's a negative for the community because they had originally pledged to be a very like open source and open community nonprofit that will drive
Yep.
innovation in this like small computer space. And I think this is just going to bring them to be a lot more investor oriented. So I am very again skeptical of what's going to happen to Raspberry Pi.
I agree. Vlad, what's your best recommendation if someone is looking to buy some Raspberry Pis? What should they buy?
Well, I think now it's the 5,
Yeah.
right? The Raspberry Pi 5 was released what mid last year.
Mm-hmm.
It should be available. As far as I know, it hasn't had as many scalpers as the 4 during COVID, and I think
Okay.
they released enough of them to be available.
Yeah, the fours
Um,
during COVID were really, really tough. Um, I think it'll be interesting. I think that we will have to do a full show in regards to Raspberry Pis for. I think we'll have to do a full show in regards to Raspberry Pis for various applications in which Vlad can avail us with all of his Raspberry Pi knowledge all the way through the Optima. The Optima was the newest one that you got, right? That was supposed to be like the PLC killer or the PLC replacement.
oh, Opta, yeah.
Opta,
I
yes.
have it somewhere. Yeah,
Yep. But I
it's
was saying we'll
yeah.
have to do a full show where we talk about all of those things, and then I can just sit here and roll my eyes and say that they're not industrial grade. I think that would be fun for everyone, don't you?
I mean, look, there's a lot of interesting advancements, right? I think we'll bring on someone who's even more familiar with them than I am. But I know
Oh,
even the
agreed.
5 made some interesting. So now you can access the PCIe slot, which makes it compatible. So you know how in the past you used to load the OS on an SD card? You
Yes.
can now load it onto an NVMe drive, which
Oh,
that adds a
interesting.
lot of robustness. And you can actually, there's people who developed very fancy like solid state NAS servers, which makes it also like pretty sweet for a
Vlad, are
variety
we
of
going to
reasons.
bore everyone with with the previous series of conversations about the NASA's? I don't
No,
think
like
so.
I said, I think just the Raspberry Pi is doing positive things, but like I said, I think now that they're going IPO, they're going to be put under more stringent requirements, which may not allow them to do so.
This Raspberry Pi 5 has two micro HDMIs
Yep.
and a
Yeah, you
USB
can
C
run 2
power.
screens.
That's wild. That's why I don't currently own two screens in order to be able to go run off of them. But I don't know. I'm probably going to go spend some money after we're done with the show, ladies and
Even
gentlemen.
the 4 has that. The 4
Do
has,
that?
yeah, yeah.
But I couldn't get a Raspberry Pi 4, Vlad.
Mm.
Every time I went to look, they're like 4 years delayed.
Yeah, but like I said, the big feature for the 5 is that whole PCIe support, which, like I
Yeah.
said, allows you to add an NVMe drive, which now expands like your previous memory was the SD card, which is
Hmm.
well like 256 gigs at best.
Yeah.
Now you can very cheaply buy like 2 terabytes, stick it on top of it, and you're no longer constrained by a USB. You know what I mean? Like it's not an external USB drive.
Uh, yes.
All right, I think we do wrap this up. It's been a very long conversation. I think
It
there's still a
has.
few people listening to us.
Ladies and gentlemen, tell us what you think about the extended conversations. Vlad continues to say we need to have even longer conversations than we normally have. Let us know how many of you made it to the end. Are you happy that you made it to the end? Do you want to listen to more longer conversations, even though this was only like 10 or 15 minutes longer than normal? But no, next week, same time, same place. If you guys have made it this far, please remember to like and subscribe. Subscribe to the Manufacturing Hub YouTube channel if you guys want to go check out all of the backlog of episodes. If you guys want to learn more, you can listen to us in podcast format. We drop every Thursday a previous episode. We're up to, I don't know, mid 150s. This is episode 163. So we are a little bit behind intentionally on that. Come check out the Manufacturing Hub LinkedIn page for all of our clips and everything along those lines. And if you guys haven't, make sure to follow Vlad and myself. If you guys have made it this far on podcast format, thank you guys so much. Please remember to hit the follow, auto download the episodes, rate us 5 stars, all of those awesome things. Until next week. Goodbye, everyone.